One. Okay, thank you for joining us today with us at EJable. Really great to be able to have you on our site to share your experience because when I went through your LinkedIn profile, I saw that you've been in and out of Japan a couple of times. So I was really curious as to your story and why you still choose to work here in Japan. So
Sure, yeah.
yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have been in and out of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, the very first time I came to Japan was kind of by accident, was through an internship program that my university offered, but you don't get to pick exactly which country you go. So I came into Japan like in actually 2012 for a 3 months internship.
Okay, I see.
That was my first encounter with Japan and like how it's working here. I thought it was very interesting. So I decided to go back, finish my studies, and come back to Japan. So I studied a little bit of Japanese and got a job offer in 2017. So then I came to Japan. I stayed in Japan until 2019 and around September, I think, where my company then sent me on an expat program to Switzerland. So then I work there for almost 2 years. And then when the expat program finished, I came back to Japan again. And that's where I've been working since then, since 2021. Yeah.
2021. Okay. And what do you do now, if you could share that with us?
So I have been today I am a data scientist at Amazon, right? And that has been my field of work for most of my career. I have worked also as a data analyst, as a BI engineer, but mostly I have been working in the data science world.
Okay. And where did you finish your last studies, if I may ask?
So my study is a bit maybe unconventional. I did my bachelor's in Brazil, in computer engineering, and I finished that, it was 2014.
Okay.
And usually in Brazil, like people who go for masters are those who want to be in academia teaching, right? So it's not so popular for people who want to go to work in like companies.
Right.
So I didn't think about like doing a master's then, right? And also because the computer engineering degrees are like a long in Brazil. So it already has the contents what, for example, in Europe, in Japan, you would include in the master's, right? So you are already considered like specialized professional.
Okay, cool.
So, and that was a bit of a clash in Japan when I encountered some companies who would like to have a master just for the sake of having a master's, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about that, I started doing an online master's from like Georgia Tech, is an American university, which they offer like a great program. So I started studying that when I was back in Brazil, and because it's online, I knew I could continue even though I wanted to move to work abroad. And it took me a long time actually to finish, but I finally finished when I was already in Japan in 2022, right? So I took a break but I finally finished. So I think it's a good combination for people who want flexibility.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I do see that online masters are now becoming more popular and popular.
Right.
So yeah, that's a great
They
opportunity.
became much more popular now because of COVID. And back then it was still niche, but it was what I didn't want to stop working, and I wanted flexibility. So that's what I choose. And I think now people respect more a title even though it was got online.
Right. That's true. So in the beginning, you said that the first encounter of being here in Japan was kind of an accident with your internship program. And
Yes.
and then being here for a couple months, you thought that you might want to come back later. What was the thing that made you want to come back and work here?
So I think I always wanted to live and work abroad, at least for some period of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this in mind, but I didn't have any specific place. But
Mm-hmm.
I was always attracted, I think, for like big cities. You know, I am from the countryside of Brazil. So I
Okay.
think this idea of being like a gigantic city was excited for me.
Mm-hmm.
I did work a little bit in São Paulo,
Okay.
but then I think when I got the like to live in Tokyo, right,
Mm-hmm.
and see like the very nice lights of the night, I
Yeah.
think that had an impact on me.
Uh-huh.
So, and I thought also because it's so different from the culture or where I am from, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that makes it more attractive for me. You know, I
Right.
think because of the differences, I think was interesting. And of course,
Okay.
all the things that people praise about Japan, like about the safety, also
Uh,
there are way more opportunities in my
mhm.
field compared to Brazil, at least when I was living there. So it was
Okay.
also like a good professional decision.
I see. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Then maybe moving on to what like your current job at Amazon. What do you
Mhm.
like working like doing as a data analyst, data scientist? And
So,
also, yeah, the working environment. Because when I hear
mhm.
Amazon, I do imagine like the States. And so I'm wondering, is the working environment more international compared to other like very Japanese
Mhm, mhm.
companies?
Yeah. So my experience in Japan is mostly on international companies, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So yeah, I think Amazon in Japan is definitely more in the international side. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, people most often would communicate in English,
Okay.
especially if you are into tech domain. I
Uh-huh.
think that's more common. Some
Mm-hmm.
areas is mostly Japanese, but I think
Okay.
compared to the average company in Japan, yeah, you definitely feel that you're like you see the average number of
Right.
people from the countries are
Yeah.
much higher. So yeah, I think that's definitely a plus. I
Mm-hmm.
think usually I think foreigner workers tend to want to gravitate towards
Right.
international. I think
Yeah, yeah.
even I think Japanese workers, I think they tend to value working in an international company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think what I like most about Amazon is I think I get to work in complex problems, and
Mm.
the people that I work with, they are really on high level in their field, their chosen field,
Right.
right? So there's a lot to learn about,
Mm-hmm.
and they are referencing many areas in how to use data, how to democratize data. So I
Mm-hmm.
think you will get to learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't plan on staying in a company like Amazon, you can bring those experience to whatever you want later.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Then could you tell us maybe when you compared to when you were working in like Switzerland or just abroad, is there a kind of a difference in the working styles or just like the project execution in Japan?
Hmm. So as I said, because I work mostly international companies,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to see when I work for, I work mostly for Amazon and Philip Morris.
Mm-hmm.
So, and these companies are similar international
Mm.
standards. So
Right.
working for Philip Morris in Japan or
Mm-hmm.
Switzerland, you get a lot of similarities, right?
Oh,
But you do see like some cultural differences. I think what is known in Japan is the avoidance of conflicts. So I think in terms of discussions, it
mm-hmm.
tends to be a bit more nuanced the way you want to make your points to come across,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, and there was even a training in a company, not my current
Okay.
company,
Oh, okay.
where they were teaching how, like, for people who come from abroad, how to deal
Uh-huh.
with discussions in Japan. So, like a
Mm.
cultural preparation. And I think that's very, I don't think they teach foreigner workers in Switzerland how to
Yeah,
negotiate.
yeah.
So I think that's
Oh,
because in Japanese culture is so unique that they
yeah.
try to teach you how things are done here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and you see in the overall business how the Japanese branches of international business tend to stand out compared to the branches in other countries in terms of like of things that usually a system in Japan is only used in Japan, or some process only exists in Japan. And talking to other friends working in other international companies, they tell similar stories. So yeah.
Oh, cool. What the about having discussions in a nuanced way, is it something you had to adopt to, or was it like easy to just get into the flow?
I think you need to adapt, right? I think it's and some people don't adapt, right? So I think that's can be difficult and to change things, you know, the way you if you want to propose some change, it can be difficult to implement this change, even if you think that it has merits. Like the argument that this is how things are done, or we're going to like change the balance that currently exists, it's usually taken into account if you want to change something.
Yeah. Right. Oh, okay, I see. Okay, then maybe thinking about your future, is there something that, do you have a plan to stay much longer? Like, do you have kind of a goal for your working here in Japan?
Yeah, no, I don't put any specific goals about like how long I want to stay. I think it depends on opportunities that you have. I can say that I feel very satisfied with a life in Japan. I think overall, everything that you get in Japan, you know, it's difficult to get in other countries, right? I often tell like some friends, or when they ask, I think Japan has solved some problems that all the other countries are trying to solve, right? Like many countries would love to have this sense of social stability that exists here, which comes from like the labor laws and also the safety. And when you there are some drawbacks to that, but I think a lot of people would want to be able to live in a society like this, you know, the level of courtesy and politeness that you have in your daily encounters, it really removes a lot of tension and stress. And I think people don't realize until they compare when they live outside and inside. So I think, yeah, so each country has its own thing. So in thinking about, would I move to another country? Yeah, maybe I would, but it would also depends on like, what are the things that I'm giving up for that and what I'm gaining.
Okay, great. Then moving on to kind of the social side of living in Japan, do you have any aspects of Japanese culture or the traditions that you like or that you don't like?
Well, I think, again, I think because I don't speak Japanese, my Japanese is very limited, right? So everything that I experience is very limited. In terms of right, so I do have a Japanese wife, so she ends up being like an intermediator of many things that I experience. But I can imagine someone like me who would come at first by himself or herself in Japan. It would get like some limited exposure to a lot of the things that Japan could offer, right? It is still, I think, a struggle to, even if you do speak the language or try to learn, I think it's very challenging to feel integrated. So if someone truly wants to feel integrated, which some people don't mind, I think it's very difficult.
Yeah. So would you kind of advise people who wish to work in Japan to kind of start learning Japanese before?
I think some people would say just study Japanese, but yeah, if they should consider also that if they like don't have a language background that matches Japanese, for example, if you already know Mandarin, for example, it's a much shorter learning curve. But if they come from like a different language background, like a Latin language, they haven't really studied Japanese so much, then I think you should consider like what is the effort that you put in learning the language against other skills. I learned Japanese enough from my daily life, but after some point, I could spend more time learning Japanese or specializing in my own field. And the decision is basically that if I spend the same time studying Japanese, it wouldn't be enough for me to get higher positions in my own field, because it would take like an amount of time that it wouldn't make sense. So I think that's, of course, it's good to, if you can speak another language, but even after you have like learned like for many years, you'll be like an N1 in Japan, you still be like not have the same level as a native. So you won't be never be as competitive in that. So it's good that if you build advantages outside the language as well.
Okay, yeah, that's a great. I've never thought about it like that, but nice, great. Then, are there any? Well, I guess you do work in an international company. So the working culture of Japan doesn't really apply the same. But is there some things that you don't like, or that you wish it would change in the future?
I mean, I said most of my experience was in international companies, but I did have an experience on very Japanese companies. On both my internship and on my first company in Japan, they were like very traditional Japanese companies. And I am glad that I lived through that. But I certainly don't want to so I experienced the exchange of meishi, or like the morning rituals, like everybody like recites like the company goals and company missions, and you clap about it. So I work in companies like that.
I didn't know.
So very strict code, like dressing code and strict. So I experienced a lot of that, and I think the like I that's something that I believe is like the worst of Japan is traditional Japanese business culture. So the strong hierarchy, and you valued more on your time that you spent or on the company, or the time you spent working during the day, than you actually deliver. So it's not very meritocratic, and doesn't make for an environment that people want to work. And I do feel like young Japanese people also don't want that, right? But because I think it's still controlled by like an old school mentality, it's difficult to change, right? So I think a Japanese company who wants to stand out and attract like more talented people, I think they have an easy way to do that.
Right. Yeah. I do hope that changes, like at least slowly. Indeed. Then other than you're working, what time, like in your free time, what do you like to do?
I go to the gym, like that was my free time kind of hobby, right? I do love, I'm a foodie, so I love to eat out, like every weekend I go to a different restaurant, so this I think is what I like the most. And that's something that maybe a lot of people who never lived in Japan don't know. Like Japan is excellent in terms of food. Excellent. And not only in the variety, so you don't have to fear that you have to eat only Japanese food, but you can find everything in Tokyo, and it's very affordable if you compare you cannot eat the same quality for the same price if you go like to Europe, for example, right? So I guess, and the availability and the affordability makes a very good experience for anyone who like enjoys eating.
I see. Wait, do you get to eat Brazilian food as well? Or do you cook?
It's actually, some people don't know, but Brazilian is one of the biggest communities in Japan.
Really? I didn't know.
It's a particular part of history that some people may be interested, but the first or second biggest Japanese community outside Japan is also in Brazil. So there was a big exchange in the past of population.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's why like you get like Brazilian cuisine very easily available in Japan, you know, and yeah, it's very good for those who don't know, should try.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Then I guess if you've lived in the countryside of Brazil, Tokyo is very busy and very
Yes.
crowded. Is it
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
something that you like or
Yeah, nobody likes to having to commute, so I think it's good. Like, yeah, I don't for I did live in share houses,
Mhm.
so it's affordable,
Right.
and then you can live close to the office, right? So if you're short in a budget, you
Mm-hmm.
know, if you don't mind living with other people, I
Mm-hmm.
recommend like just move
Mm.
to a share house and then save some time in
Right.
commuting. Like, and
Yeah.
if you come to Japan by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's a great way to meet new people in similar
That's true.
conditions, right?
Oh,
And
right.
I think this concept of share housing maybe is different in other countries, like because usually you do that when you're in university, but you don't do
Right.
that as a working
Yeah.
adult. Maybe you share an apartment with a friend.
Right.
And in Japan, it's very common to have this kind of settings.
Okay.
And so I think it's worth to give a try if you move to
Mm.
Japan and you
Okay.
make new friends, and then later you can move to your own place.
Okay. So where you stayed, was it like a mix of Japanese and
Yes.
foreign? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
Nice.
yeah, another thing is that usually this is catered for foreigners
Oh,
as
wow.
well.
Oh,
So it
nice.
you like the process of like being able to rent is simple because it's not simple for a
Ah,
foreigner to be able to rent in
that's
Japan.
true. Yeah, I
There are
hear
many
that.
restrictions.
Uh-huh.
So it's a good, easy way to deal with real estate. So yeah,
Oh,
and
okay.
there's always like many foreigners,
Right.
and there's like those that are only for women, for example. So if some
Okay.
can also live there,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, there's good availability, you know,
Okay.
and usually the houses also offer more amenities. You know, I
Mm.
live in one that had like a rooftop in front of Tokyo Tower, which
Oh,
I wouldn't be
wow.
able to rent by myself an apartment like that.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Another one, there was a Sento inside. So I
Oh,
think,
wow. Okay.
yeah, so I think can be fun, especially if you're
Mm.
younger, you know, in your
Yeah.
20s. So I think it's something that's good.
Okay. Wow. That's good to know. Okay.
Mm.
Then my last question would be, do you have any tips or advice for people who wish to work here in Japan or who are trying to get a job in Japan? Like during
Uh,
maybe interviews or just in their CVs?
I
Yeah.
see. I mean, I think CV wise, I think it's similar, at least
Mm-hmm.
my experience. I think there are like some specific job boards and that you may I use, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like I use Die Job, for example, and
Ah,
they're like
yes.
specific.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they use this and really like put yourself to apply, you know, and if you find
Mm-hmm.
some startups in LinkedIn, for example, reach
Mm-hmm.
out directly to the HR person or even the CEO if the company is small.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really is an option that some people don't even think that's possible.
Right.
I know that in Asia, a lot of Japanese companies will go to their countries to do a
Ah,
recruiting, right?
yes.
But if you are not from Asia, like sometimes that
Mm.
doesn't like it doesn't exist in Brazil. Like Japanese companies go all the way that
Yeah.
recruit to work in Japan,
Yeah.
and and many of my friends thought that was a bit very unlikely that I would get something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it happened. So it is
Mm-hmm.
possible. You just need to keep pushing, you know, as
Mm.
I think for anything in life, until you find an opportunity. And if you can manage just to show a little bit of Japanese skills,
Okay.
the employer might be understand that you're serious about this, right?
That's true.
Mhm.
Okay. Great. Well, that's it from my side.
Okay,
And
it's
so
good.
thank you for your time today. It was a pleasure to
And thank
talk
you
to
so
you.
much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.